everyone. Welcome to the Fingerprints podcast. We're your hosts, Nicole and Phoebe.
Today I would like to introduce you to a very good friend of mine and our new guest, Gabriel.
Hello, Phoebe and Nicole. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Gabriel Sanson Gomez. I am British and Mexican, 17 years old, but I currently live in Qatar.
Great, let's start then. Gabriel, what's your story?
Well, I'm going to start the story where I think all great stories should start. And that's on a cold September morning in Switzerland in 2003. For one reason or another, my family couldn't make it to the hospital on time, and I had the special distinction from birth of having been born in a car, which to this day my family use as a sort of life lesson to teach me that you don't really get to choose where you're born, and you don't get to really choose who you're born to. And I think this lesson has sort of taught me how to deal with not only myself, but the world around me. I was born into a family that, for several different reasons, had to move around the world many different times, and I've spent all of my life traveling to different countries and meeting different people and leaving different places. So I think that my life story has really led me to understand the concept of what home really means to someone where home isn't necessarily where they live. I left Switzerland 2 years after I was born. I moved to Mexico. I am half Mexican, and this was really my first chance to connect with one of my countries of nationality. And I think those 7 years that I was there really marked, in my early stage of childhood, what I would value. And I, now looking back on my time there, really value the time I got to be there speaking Spanish. I value the time being there meeting people. I value the time being there understanding the culture and the history and the geography and the politics in a way of this wonderful country of Mexico that I love so much. And in a way, that's when life I could consider to be normal. I was living in the country of my nationality. I had a parent who's from the country I lived in, and in my mind, in my 9-year-old mind at the time, I thought that was what normal was. And I now know it's much more complex than that, and I would learn that in a way the hard way when, at the age of 9, I left Mexico to move to the United States, and that was completely different. I found myself in a situation where I was no longer the insider, I was the outsider. And I had to make a very important decision from the start, and it was whether to fit in, whether to be part of the group, and whether to become American, or whether to stand out, whether to be myself and to be seen as Mexican. And I was conflicted, of course, as a 10-year-old at that time, because I noticed that people that made themselves individualistic, people that stood out for who they were, as valiantly as they tried to be themselves, society and people around them wouldn't necessarily have the same reaction. And at that time, I thought that I had to really balance myself, and I had to really figure out who I wanted to be. And I was in the United States for 6 years, and even up to the point before I left, when I was 15, I had to struggle with the question, who am I? Where am I from? And where is home for me? Because people around me that didn't necessarily have a conversation with me before because of the way I looked or the way I talked would assume that I was American. I had an American accent. I looked like all my American friends, and I didn't really talk about myself or where I came from unless someone specifically asked me to. So up until that point, I was a bit conflicted. And in a way, the truth came about through quite a unique and honestly kind of arbitrary way. In my family, I was handed down a t-shirt from one of my older brothers, and written on it was the phrase, "Home is where the heart is." And I mean, at the time, I didn't really know what to think of it. I just kind of brushed it off and wore it because I didn't really have many other clothes at the time. But as I grew older and I realized what it meant to have a home and what home really meant to people, I noticed that home wasn't necessarily a country or a place or a city. Home was an identity. Home was the people you love, the people you care about, and maybe not necessarily where they live or where they are, but what they mean to you in your heart. And I've taken that lesson quite importantly because when I left the United States 2 years ago, at the age of 15, I also left my family for the first time. I started boarding school, and that was really a time for me to understand what home was. And I still carry that lesson to me. I think home is in my heart. Home is my thoughts, my memories, my opinions, beliefs, values, and these all come from my time in different countries, my time with my family. And I think that that's really taught me that I don't have to come from a certain place or live in a certain place or physically be in an environment to connect with it. And I think that's one of the most valuable lessons I've ever learned in my life. And one that I think that many people that have had to change environments throughout their lives can understand and hopefully can connect with as well.
Thank you so much for sharing this story, Gabriel. My first question is, you say that you don't get to choose where you're born, and this lesson taught you how to deal with the world around you. Therefore, if I were to ask you what is one thing that you always have in the back of your mind, something that helps you deal with the situations you are placed in, what would it be?
That question actually made me think quite a lot because initially I wasn't really sure. I feel that over the course of my life, through these different experiences, it's maybe changed a bit. But more recently, I can say that I've always kept in the back of my mind that I need to be open-minded and that I need to be flexible in the things that I do and in the ways I approach situations. Because, like I said, you don't get to choose where you're born. You don't get to choose the situation you're placed in. So I feel that by learning to grow within that situation and to adapt, and having an open mindset for it, you can always make the most of the situation and have the potential to not only help yourself but everyone else as well.
So, Gabriel, if your personal concept of home is so fluid, do you still experience emotions of homesickness or something like a disconnection?
Starting on the point of homesickness, I actually found it really interesting how, I don't know how to explain it, unhomesick I was when I left my family for the first time. When I started boarding school, I really just sort of adapted quite quickly, and it feels a bit weird to say it, but I never really felt homesick at any point. And looking back on it now, I was trying to think, and I guess what I was thinking was, what do I feel homesick about? Because I'd always had the attachment to the people and not the spaces. And I feel like homesickness for a lot of people, or at least when I imagine it, is attached to spaces. What I did feel occasionally was maybe that isolation or loneliness. And that in a way might have taken the role of homesickness since I was attached to the people and I might have been missing the people. But in the traditional sense, no, I don't think I really have been experiencing any homesickness, especially recently, which I find quite interesting.
Just as we're talking about the things you can miss, what do you love most about Mexico?
And there's the obvious things that sort of jump out to me about Mexico. I've always sort of loved the people, the culture, the environment, the history. I think looking back on it now, a bit older, a bit more understanding what I was dealing with back then, I think a lot of it might have been that I felt part of the group. I felt included and I felt that I was in a place where I belonged. And at such a young age, that's very important, I think. And that really helped build up a lot of my values and beliefs and memories, which helped me throughout my life. So if I hadn't had that experience, I think I'd be quite a different person. So I think apart from that, from Mexico giving me so many experiences through the language and the culture, it also indirectly helped build up my sense of belonging for the environment and help me understand where I've actually come from on an emotional standpoint.
How did the balancing and figuring out what you wanted to be happen? Do you now know who you are and who you want to be?
Well, the whole balancing act, as I kind of see it, was quite a long-term process. It took a lot of time, and it took very different directions and turns and approaches. I think initially maybe I felt I needed to fit in, but as I grew older, I understood that I could be my own person, and that was okay, and I could be special in that way. and that made me happy. So once I found what really made me happy, or what made me happier, I was able to sort of build in that direction and sort of find what made me happier about myself in a way that still allowed me to be part of a group or to share my experiences in a useful way. And that took time. And I mean, even today, I'm not really sure. I'm still hopeful I can build on it, because there's still parts of me I don't really understand yet. There's still parts of me I want to improve, and there's still parts of me that I wish I knew more about. So I hope that in the next few years, or just generally through life, and any day at a time, I'm able to sort of grow and better understand myself, the people around me, and how that can influence me in the future in the way I look at the world.
And also, do you think that this idea of home, which you carry within your heart, will change over the years? Do you think that in the future you will create your own home, which is maybe a place or a different group of people?
Well, I have a bonus anecdote for that question. When I was a kid, I always wanted to be an airline pilot. And looking back on it now, I think that sort of symbolized a career where I'd always be moving around, I'd always be in a new place, and I'd never settled down in one particular environment. And that sort of represented the state of mind I was in when I was younger. More recently, I've been thinking about different careers in different spaces that are slightly more stationary. And I think that also represents a possible open-mindedness towards learning about the place I've been in and sort of growing some roots. But I'm still stuck between two minds at the moment, and it can definitely be a mix of the two things in the future, I'm not sure. But what I do know is that I'm still figuring it out, and I don't have all the answers yet. So I'll have to get back to you guys with that answer in the next few years, possibly. But as of now, I am still not sure.
That's very well said. I'm wondering, in your opinion, what constitutes an identity?
Well, I think it's firstly important to understand that every person's experience is different, and that's going to determine the way they interpret the concept of an identity. I feel that for me, because I've had a life where I've been in so many different places, and the world around me has been ever-changing and sort of fluid in a way, that makes my identity fluid. And so I think personally, if I had to define identity, I would consider it a string of experiences, possibly values, but also personal beliefs and people possibly that push you towards a certain direction, an emotional compass in a way that guides you in the path of prosperity or bettering yourself or whatever goal you choose to follow. And I feel that by picturing it as a compass, you understand that it's really a tool. Your identity is a tool to understand yourself, it's a tool to understand your journey, and it's also a tool to understand your destination.
I have one last question. What's your favorite home memory? A memory from home?
I really like this question because it sort of, in a way, helped me understand the concept of home for me again. Because as I was thinking about this idea of what my favorite memory of home was, the instant things that jumped to my mind were my family and the experiences I've had with my family. And how that came in my mind was that I sort of pictured the family before the space around me or the physical environment, and that sort of helped in my mind justify the idea that for me home is my family, or home is the people around me or the people I care about, because ultimately the space around me was just secondary, and the primary experience, what I was enjoying from it, came from the people around me. So to give an example, for example, I think we'd have movie nights, my family and I, we'd sort of watch movies together every weekend, and we'd all spend our time together. It was one of the only times we'd really be all together in one space during the week. So I think those moments, looking back on it, I'm quite happy I had. Now, especially when I'm away from my family, it's nice to remember those moments when they were closer.
Thank you so much for sharing this story. It was truly inspirational, and I really enjoyed learning and hearing more from you on the topic of home.
Thank you for the opportunity. It was a pleasure.
See you soon!
Fingerprints, a podcast embracing uniqueness, featuring real people and real stories.